Now, the housing crisis has left many students with unfavourable possibilities such as homelessness, settling for substandard housing, and even travelling long distances and incurring high costs as a result. Now, with one bed available for every 3.3 students in South Africa, this deficit impacts access to education as well as student well-being. And student accommodation has also been impacted by delayed payments, accreditation disputes, as well as quality concerns, which remain a major pressure point. And this morning, as part of our higher education system focus, we take a closer look at this issue. And we now go to Leanne, who, of course, is here in Auckland Park, where you'll know the SABC. Essentially, Leanne, we are, of course, sandwiched by two universities, the University of Johannesburg and Wits University. So you are not too far from the studio, but talk to us about where you're at.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks very much, Sakina. We literally, as you say, just down the road from the Auckland Park studios. And this is a feeder where we're broadcasting from now. Horizon Heights is a feeder for the University of Johannesburg. When I say a feeder, I should say the accommodation facility that's available to students in the area. There are so many of these different privately owned accommodation facilities, which, by the way, this is absolutely beautiful for students that are lucky enough to be able to afford to stay in a facility like this. But the harsh reality outside is the fact that at current levels now, in current numbers, there's literally one bed for 3.3 learners or students. And that's physically impossible. It really is. There's just not enough facilities out there to house the amount of students that are out there. And that's why we start seeing these popping up all over the place. And the demand is there for students to obviously want to get an education, but they can't travel the distances every day to get to universities. And whether or not there's enough on-campus sites to actually house these students, that's the big problem, because the answer to that, and the very short answer, is no. And that's why you need these private institutions. But let's speak a little bit more. And my next guest is going to speak to us about this. This is Kagisho Mamabolo. Now, Kagisho, you'll recognize, because he used to work for NSFAS for about almost 10 years, but he is now the CEO of the Private Student Housing Association and former NSFAS executive there as well. Such a pleasure to have you, and thanks for letting us come and visit this facility out in Auckland Park.
Thank you for inviting us. We are very happy to host you.
So I want to start off by talking about just how big the student accommodation gap is in South Africa right now.
It's very big. It's around 300,000 shortage, and this is anticipated to grow to 500,000 gap. But as the Private Student Housing Association, we provide roughly 80,000 of these beds, and we will add more 20,000 in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and this is, it's amazing to see these growing, and the reality is that we saw a record pass rate from matrics, bachelor passes to try and get into university, and yet it doesn't seem to be, the university sector and the accommodation and everything doesn't seem to be growing to fit the number of students that are now qualifying to come and study.
Absolutely. We are under pressure. When we saw those numbers, we realized that the demand is going to continue to increase, especially for the TVET area and the NSFAS funding as it continues to increase. However, our investors are under pressure. They are not willing to invest more in the private student accommodation. This is simply because the NSFAS rate at the moment and the policy around student accommodation is unsustainable. There's constant flip-flops that makes investment not really confident into the sector. So we hope that through the Minister of Finance, working with the Minister of Higher Education and Training, probably there would be an introduction of student accommodation framework that will ensure that private sector builds and work closely with universities and TVET colleges to bridge the gap, because we don't think government have enough money in the fiscus to build student accommodation alone.
So it's these partnerships. Let's talk to how it currently stands right now. So we're standing at this facility that's a privately owned facility, and it's wonderful. It really is. I mean, from what we've seen, and we're going to also take the viewers up into a couple of the rooms so they can actually see where the students are sleeping. But I can see learning facilities. There's a choir. There's been cheerleaders, dancing. I mean, it's a beautiful student life. How much does something like this cost?
We have different room types with different room prices, simply because students don't come from the same background. We're trying to accommodate NSFAS funded students where their room starts from 5,500 and the last room goes up to 9,000. And those are your bachelors. But we do have 2 room sharings. We have 3 room sharings. And when I say sharing, I mean the students have their own door and they lock, but they share communal areas.
So that's well and good for those that are self-funded and they can afford to come here and pay this amount every single month. What about your NSFAS students? Now, do you have a certain obligation to accept X amount of NSFAS students? How does that work? Because as I'm understanding from you, NSFAS, there's still outstanding payments for students from 2014.
Yes, they still owe us 2024. They still owe us for 2025.
2014, I'm confusing you, 2024, I beg your pardon.
And this year, we have taken NSFAS students without any assurity. What I mean by that is that we don't know how much NSFAS is going to pay for 2026 for their rent. Number 2, some students are not confident with their status for funding. So those students may be unfunded down in the year. But as private accommodation landlords, we understand the sector. So what we have done, we have made certain rooms available for NSFAS students. We can't have the entire building for NSFAS students. These buildings are not built for NSFAS students. They are built for all students funded by different bursaries. So we have those NSFAS specific accommodation. And
how many are we talking about?
Well, it's around, maybe I would say 50% of the building.
About 50%. There's about 900, approximately 900 beds here. So about
but
50%
it differs from one building to the other.
Okay.
So you'd find that in other properties, you've got about 70%, which is NSFAS students.
So NSFAS hasn't paid, obviously. We've got outstanding debt, still hasn't paid for this year. What do you do with the students? I mean, if it gets to a point where it's halfway through the year, there's still no payment from NSFAS, do the students find that they actually are asked to leave?
Yes, some landlords do that, but in our engagement with NSFAS, that is the last option. In fact, what we have been saying to NSFAS is that just give us some kind of assurance. You know, in case a student is unfunded, we can't chase that student, especially if we know the background they come from. Some of our members have some charity beds. We have students that we give them employment. They are part of the staff complement, and through that they are able to get some incentives for staying with us.
So let me ask you, you've been on both sides. So now you're on the private side now,
Yes.
which you have seen from being right there involved in NSFAS. What's the problem? I mean, you're seeing now what the problem and the issue is, and I imagine, I mean, you're desperate to get an education, and then because NSFAS is not paying, you're kicked out, and you've got to find somewhere to sleep to finish your degree, and you can't because you just don't have the money. Where's the problem? Why is it not reaching the beneficiaries?
I think the biggest problem of NSFAS, and of course these are my own opinion, I've worked as the longest executive for almost 10 years. In that 10 years, I had 5 CEOs and maybe 3 boards. So the NSFAS leadership is like a revolving door, and it's difficult to run such a complex funding scheme in the world. When I was at NSFAS, we traveled the world, and we realized that the administration of NSFAS is quite complex. So changing leadership constantly and not consulting all the stakeholders, that's where the problem is. Landlords are not consulted, are not asked to say, what can we do if government does not have money to increase the rent? How can NSFAS and government and the landlords save in order to provide the student with more solutions? And we've provided solutions. We do research as the Private Student Housing Association. We've engaged SALGA and say 30% to 40% of the NSFAS rate goes to utilities. electricity and all those kind of things. So if we engage municipalities in South Africa to treat student accommodation as a social infrastructure, then the NSFAS rental will go a long way.
Yeah, indeed. I know that there were, I think it was the finance minister himself that actually said, Enoch Godongwana said,
yes,
South Africa does not really need NSFAS. Do you agree with him?
I think NSFAS is very important, but it has to do its job.
But it's not doing its job.
I cannot comment on
All
that.
right, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there because these are pressing questions and questions that we hopefully will be able to pose to NSFAS because they're going to be joining us tomorrow. They'll be having a briefing at 9 o'clock this morning. But this is the reality. You come here, there's beautiful private accommodation. This is available, but there are not many South Africans that can afford between 5,000 and 9,000 rand a month to come here on top of your university fees to come and stay in these beautiful facilities that are available to help students, because that at the end of the day is you need an environment that's conducive to learning if you want to succeed in your chosen field. Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing us firstly to come in and also to speaking to us here on the program as well. All right, let's leave it there. We of course are going to continue broadcasting. This was our guest, Kagisho Mamabolo. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Private Student Housing Association. We'll see you after this.
Well, thanks, Leanne. And as she says, we'll check in with her again later.